It's not what you think. This isn't just about pleasure or romance. It's about your heart, your brain, your immune system, and even your longevity. Ignore this, and you could be unknowingly sacrificing your health year by year. I'm Dr. James Ellison, a board-certified urologist with over 30 years of experience in men's and women's sexual health. After working with thousands of older adults, I've seen one truth again and again. When intimacy disappears, vitality often fades. But it doesn't have to. In this video, I'll reveal exactly what happens to your body, your mind, and your quality of life when sex disappears from your golden years. Most people expect to slow down with age, but giving up intimacy may silently increase your risk of heart disease, cognitive decline, depression, and even early death. The connection between sex and health in older adults is deeper than most people, and even many doctors realize, and by the time the damage becomes visible, it's often already taken a toll. Let's change that. It starts with awareness, and it starts today. In this video, I'll show you the science behind why sexual activity in older age isn't optional. It's essential. You'll learn how it supports your immune system, sharpens your brain, protects your heart, and restores your confidence, and I'll show you exactly what you can do starting today to safely and naturally reclaim this part of your life. And near the end of this video, I'll reveal one simple daily habit that can reawaken your body's ability to experience intimacy, even if it's been years. This small step could change your sleep, your mood, and even your outlook on life. So stick with me before we continue. If this message resonates with you, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss another life-changing health tip designed specifically for you. And if you find this valuable, type 1 in the comments, if not type 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly supports your journey. Now let's talk about what really happens when intimacy fades, starting with the organ that keeps you alive. Your heart. Most people think of cholesterol, blood pressure, and medication when it comes to heart health. But very few realize that a lack of physical intimacy in later life can quietly weaken the heart in ways you don't feel until it's too late. Let me explain one. Your heart begins to weaken. I remember one of my patients, a 68-year-old man named George. He was active, sharp, and proud of maintaining good habits, healthy eating, regular walking, and routine checkups. But over the years, he had quietly let go of physical intimacy with his wife. "It's just part of aging," he told me during one visit. But what he didn't realize, and what so many don't, is that intimacy is more than emotional connection. It's a lifeline to physical health, starting with the heart, sexual activity. In older age, acts like a gentle form of cardiovascular exercise. It increases blood circulation, supports lower blood pressure, and keeps your arteries flexible. These benefits are critical as we age, especially when the risks for stroke, heart attack, and hypertension begin to climb when intimacy fades from your life. Even if everything else seems stable, your heart begins to miss this form of healthy stimulation. You see, your heart isn't just a muscle that pumps blood. It's also deeply connected to how we experience touch, affection, and emotional closeness during intimacy. Hormones like oxytocin and endorphins are released. These don't just make us feel good. They actively reduce stress, lower inflammation, and help regulate the rhythm of the heart. Without them, even with perfect cholesterol and a clean diet, your heart works harder than it should. George didn't have a heart attack, but he began noticing changes: heavier
breathing after stairs, more fatigue in the morning, and an uneasiness he couldn't quite name. When we talked more deeply, I learned about the emotional distance he'd been feeling, and how physical affection had quietly disappeared from his marriage. After gently restoring that connection, along with some light medication, he came back months later, not just feeling better, but more alive. Too many seniors believe that sexual health no longer matters after a certain age. The truth is, it might matter even more, not for performance or passion, but for survival, strength, and peace of mind. But the heart isn't the only part of the body that begins to slip when intimacy disappears. What happens next may surprise you, because the loss doesn't just stay internal. It shows up in the way your body moves, your balance, and even how strong you feel on your feet. Let's talk about that next. If you're still here, and this message is resonating with you, type the number 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Your presence matters now. Let's continue with the next truth. You need to hear point number 2.
Two muscles and joints lose vitality. Years ago, I had a patient named Linda. She was 72, cheerful, sharp-witted, and always the first to crack a joke in my exam room. But one day she mentioned something that caught my attention, not about illness, but about how she'd been feeling slower, stiffer, and more unsure on her feet. She assumed it was just part of getting older, but when we dug deeper, I discovered something that many people overlook. She and her partner hadn't been physically intimate in nearly a decade, and she didn't think that mattered, but it does. What most people don't realize is that intimacy isn't just emotional, it's physical in the most literal sense. During sexual activity, your body engages multiple muscle groups. Your core, thighs, back, hips, and pelvic floor movements that come naturally during intimacy actually contribute to maintaining muscle tone, flexibility, and balance. It may not be a workout in the traditional sense, but it has measurable benefits that are especially important as we age, when that kind of activity disappears from your life. Even slowly, the effects are real. Muscles begin to weaken from lack of use. Joints stiffen, balance diminishes before you know it. You're moving less, not because you want to, but because your body feels less capable. What's more, with that decline comes a drop in confidence. You start to second-guess your ability to move freely, and that self-doubt often leads to even more physical withdrawal with Linda. Once she and her partner began to rekindle intimacy, even through simple gestures like slow dancing or holding each other, more often her mobility began to improve. She told me she started walking taller, felt steadier, and didn't tire as quickly. It
wasn't magic, it was movement, purposeful, joyful, and consistent. So yes, staying sexually active is about pleasure, but it's also about power. The power to stay mobile, the power to stay strong, and the power to feel like your body is still yours. But movement is just one piece of the puzzle. What if I told you that letting go of intimacy doesn't only affect your body, but your brain? And not just your mood, but your memory, focus, and even your risk of mental decline. What happens next may change how you think about aging. Forever. 3. Your brain takes a hit. One of the moments that stayed with me was a quiet conversation with a patient named Thomas. Age 74, he came in for a routine visit, but something was different. He was struggling to find words, losing track of stories, mid-sentence, and seemed more withdrawn than usual. He looked at me and said, "Doc, I feel like I'm fading. Not just my body, my mind." That hit me hard, not because it was rare, but because I hear it more often than you might. We often talk about keeping the brain sharp with puzzles, reading, or diet, and those are all important. But few people realize how deeply connected physical intimacy is to mental clarity during sex. The brain releases a powerful mix of chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. These aren't just feel-good hormones. They reduce stress, enhance memory, elevate mood, and improve focus for older adults. They serve as a natural defense against anxiety, depression, and
even early cognitive decline. When intimacy disappears, your brain loses this chemical stimulation. It's like taking away fuel from a fire. It doesn't go out immediately, but it dims over time. The lack of physical connection can lead to emotional dullness, foggy memory, and a reduced sense of self. I've seen patients who, once they began to reintroduce intimacy, whether through sex cuddling or even prolonged affectionate touch, began to report sharper thinking, improved mood, and a deeper sense of presence. Thomas wasn't suffering from disease. He was suffering from disconnection as he and his partner began to rebuild their emotional and physical closeness. He told me something I'll never forget. "I don't just feel clearer, I feel like myself again." Our minds need stimulation, not only from books or conversations, but from human connection, the warmth of touch, the spark of desire, the feeling of being needed. All of these remind the brain that it still has a role to play, that it's still alive. But the brain isn't the only part of you that fades quietly. What happens next reaches into your deepest emotional core, because when physical intimacy disappears, something even more painful
begins to slip away. Your ability to feel deeply connected to the person you love, and that loss, it can break even the strongest hearts. If you're still watching and these insights are speaking to you, drop a number 1 in the comments to let me know you're here and engaged. Now let's keep going. Point number 4 is one you won't want to miss. 4. Emotional intimacy begins to fade. A few years ago, I sat with a couple in their late 70s. Frank and Ellen, married for over 50 years. They were the kind of couple that used to finish each other's sentences. But lately, something had changed. They still cared deeply for one another, but Ellen admitted through quiet tears, "It feels like we're just living side by side now, not really together." That kind of emotional distance doesn't usually happen all at once. It slips in gradually. When physical intimacy fades from a relationship, sex is often misunderstood. It's not just about desire or pleasure. Especially in our later years, it becomes a way to express vulnerability, affection, and emotional truth. When that part of a relationship disappears, so does a powerful form of connection over time.
Couples stop reaching for each other. Conversations turn into logistics, eye contact fades, and that spark, the one that says, "I see you, I value you, I still want you," begins to dim. It's one of the quietest forms of grief I've witnessed in my practice. People still love each other deeply, but they feel more like companions than lovers, more like roommates than soulmates, and the loss of that emotional intimacy can lead to feelings of rejection, loneliness, and even resentment, often unspoken, but deeply felt. Frank later shared something that stayed with me. He said, "I thought we were just aging, but really we were drifting." When he and Ellen began to intentionally rebuild their closeness, small touches, gentle conversations, holding hands again, their dynamic began to change. He told me it was like falling in love all over again with the same person. As we grow older, our need for emotional connection doesn't shrink. In fact, it deepens, and physical intimacy is one of the most powerful tools we have to sustain that connection. But emotional closeness isn't the only thing we lose. When intimacy disappears, there's something else that begins to suffer quietly, night after night, something that affects how we heal, how we think, and how we function during the day. What is it? Let's talk about the one thing we all crave but struggle to hold on to as we age: deep, restful sleep. 5. Sleep becomes a struggle. I remember a patient named Carol who came to see me, not for pain or illness, but because she couldn't sleep. She was 70, vibrant, sharp, and active during the day, but every night she tossed and turned, sometimes getting just a few broken hours of rest. "I've tried
everything," she said. "Pills, meditation, even warm milk, nothing helps." At first glance, it seemed like a common part of aging, but as we talked more, something deeper came to the surface. Carol had also been living without physical intimacy for years. She hadn't thought the two were connected, but I knew better. Sexual intimacy triggers powerful physiological changes in the body. Especially after orgasm, the release of prolactin induces a feeling of relaxation and helps prepare the body for deep sleep. At the same time, oxytocin, the hormone of bonding and comfort, lowers stress and anxiety levels, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. These aren't minor effects, they are part of the body's natural rhythm, and when intimacy fades, that rhythm often becomes disrupted. What Carol experienced was not just sleeplessness. It was a loss of connection, not only with her partner, but with the signals her body once relied on to wind down and recover. She didn't need another prescription. She needed to reawaken the softer, quieter parts of herself that had gone dormant over time.
Through gentle touch, open conversations, and slowly restoring emotional closeness, her sleep began to improve. She later told me it wasn't just about rest, it was about feeling safe, held, and at peace. Again, sleep is where the body heals. It's where the brain sorts and stores memory, where the immune system rebuilds, and where emotional resilience is formed. When we lose, that we lose far more than just energy, we lose stability, but the impact of lost intimacy doesn't stop at night. There's something even more personal and vulnerable at stake, something that strikes right at the core of how we see ourselves. Because when we stop feeling wanted or touched, we often begin to forget our own worth. What happens next may be the most damaging consequence of all. Let's talk about confidence. 6. Self-esteem and confidence decline. I once had a man in his early 70s sit across from me during a routine checkup. His name was Robert, and he was the picture of health fit for his age. Well-groomed, polite, but behind his calm demeanor, I sensed something heavier. After some gentle conversation, he said quietly, "I don't feel like a man anymore. I feel invisible." That wasn't a medical complaint, that was a confession, and it's one I've heard in different forms from many men and women over the years. As we age, we expect some changes: gray hair, slower steps, a few more wrinkles, but what many people don't expect is how deeply the loss of physical intimacy can shake their sense of identity when we no longer feel desired or touched. We begin to question our value. We wonder if we're still attractive, still worthy of closeness, still alive in that deeply human way, and over time that quiet erosion of self-worth becomes louder. We avoid mirrors, we stop expressing affection, we
shrink ourselves not out of shame, but out of doubt. I remember Robert telling me, "It's not that I don't want to be close, I just don't think anyone would want me that way anymore." That belief is one of the most harmful myths about aging. Because the truth is, desire doesn't expire, and neither does the need to feel seen, touched, and loved. When Robert and his wife began rebuilding their intimacy, slowly, gently, with no pressure, they both began to light up in ways I hadn't seen before. He came back months later and said, "I feel like I matter again." Confidence in later life isn't about performance or appearances. It's about connection. It's about being reminded through touch and presence that you are still worthy of affection and joy. Physical intimacy, even in its simplest form, helps restore that truth. But it's not just about how we see ourselves. There's something else happening quietly beneath the surface. When intimacy fades, something that puts our very ability to fight off illness at risk. You might be surprised to learn that one of your body's most powerful
defense systems depends on connection too. Let's talk about your immune system. 7. Your immune system weakens. A woman named Grace came to see me. One fall, frustrated and confused. She was 69, lived an active lifestyle, ate well, and had always taken pride in staying healthy. But that year, she couldn't seem to shake recurring colds, low-grade infections, and an overall feeling of fatigue. "I'm doing everything right," she said. "So why do I feel like I'm falling apart?" What Grace didn't realize, and what many people don't, is that one of the most overlooked supports, for the immune system, is physical intimacy. We tend to think of immunity in terms of vitamins, flu shots, or exercise, and while those things matter, they're only part of the picture. Regular sexual activity, especially in older adults, has been shown to increase levels of immunoglobulin A or IgA, a powerful antibody that helps protect against common illnesses. In other words, connection can quite literally help you fight off sickness. During intimacy, the body releases a mix of hormones that do more than just make you feel good. They reduce stress hormones like cortisol, which when chronically elevated can suppress immune function. When we go without this natural release of tension, our bodies become more vulnerable. Inflammation rises, and the immune system has to work harder just to keep up over time. That wear and tear adds up, and you may find yourself getting sick more often, recovering more slowly, or feeling drained without knowing why. When I spoke to Grace about her personal life, she opened up about a growing emotional and physical distance from her partner. It hadn't been intentional, just something that slowly faded with time. They had both chalked it up to aging, but with a little encouragement and the help of a
counselor. They began to reconnect first emotionally, then physically. A few months later, she came back smiling, fewer colds, more energy. She looked vibrant again, and she said, "I had no idea how much my body needed that." When we think of staying healthy, we don't often think of intimacy, but maybe we should. Because sometimes the medicine your body needs most isn't found in a bottle. It's found in the warmth of another person. And speaking of medicine, there's another natural remedy for aging that most people overlook. It's one that directly combats one of the most destructive forces in the body, chronic stress. Let's take a closer look. 8. Stress and anxiety increase. I remember sitting with a patient named Harold, a retired school principal who'd spent his life leading with calm and control. But now in his early 80s, he described something he couldn't quite make sense of. "I get irritated for no reason. He told me little things bother me more than they used to. I feel anxious on edge, like I can't catch my breath even when everything's fine." He shrugged it off at first, calling it just age, but I knew.
Better, what Harold was experiencing wasn't just aging, it was the slow buildup of unmanaged stress. And what many people don't realize is that one of the most powerful natural stress relievers is physical intimacy. When we engage in closeness, whether that's sex, touch, or simple affection, the body releases a cocktail of calming hormones, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These act like nature's own anxiety medication, lowering cortisol and bringing the nervous system back into balance. Without this kind of connection, stress has nowhere to go. It simmers under the surface, showing up as irritability, sleep trouble, headaches, digestive issues, and emotional fatigue. It wears you down in ways you don't always notice until it feels overwhelming. I often ask my patients, when was the last time you felt truly close to someone, not just present, but safe, relaxed, at ease? Too often the answer is silence for Harold. The solution wasn't a new prescription, it was a conversation with his wife. They drifted as many couples do with time. But as they made small steps to reconnect, quiet evenings together, touch without expectation, shared moments of laughter, he began to feel lighter. It's not just her. He told me one day, "It's like I got part of myself back." Stress in older age is real and often more dangerous than we realize, but the answer isn't always in a pill bottle. Sometimes it's found in reaching out, letting someone in, and allowing yourself to be held again. And while stress can shake your inner world, there's another consequence of lost intimacy that affects your outer one, your closest relationships. Because when physical connection fades, something in your partnership begins to shift, and if left unrest, it can quietly pull two
people apart. Let's talk about what happens to relationships when intimacy disappears. 9 relationships become more fragile. Not long ago, a couple in their late 70s. Sam and Diane came to my office not for a medical issue, but because something in their relationship felt broken. They couldn't quite explain it. "We still love each other," Diane said. "But it's like we're living separate lives." They weren't fighting. There wasn't anger. Just distant silence, a growing space between them where connection used to be. And at the heart of that space was the absence of physical intimacy. For decades, their marriage had been full of laughter, closeness, and physical affection. But over the last few years, touch had quietly disappeared. No more kisses. Goodnight, no more spontaneous hugs, no more reaching across the bed. It wasn't intentional. It just faded the way routines tend to do when we assume time has run its course. But in that absence, something deeper had unraveled. Emotional closeness, physical intimacy, is more than a private act. It's a language. It's how couples say, "I still see you, I still want you, and you still matter to me."
When that language stops being spoken, the relationship loses its rhythm. Conversations become surface-level, affection becomes awkward, And that rich emotional connection that once made love feel alive, it starts to wither. Sam told me, "I thought we were just getting old, but I realize now we stopped showing each other that we cared with patience, openness, and small steps, hand-holding quiet time together. Even sitting close on the couch, they began to rebuild their bond. And when intimacy returned, so did the laughter, the playfulness, the sense of being a team again." Diane smiled and said, "It's like we're waking up from a long nap." A relationship can survive many things, but neglect, especially emotional neglect, can quietly do the most damage. Physical closeness keeps love from slipping into friendship, and friendship from fading into habit. But if you think that's where the story ends, think again, because when intimacy is gone for too long, something else starts to happen. Something that affects your very body in a way that's hard to reverse. What if I told you your body can actually forget how to be intimate at all? Let's talk about what happens when your body stops. Remembering 10. The body forgets. A man named Paul once sat across from me. His eyes cast down, voice low. He was 76 and had been widowed for a few years after starting to date again. He told me something that many are too embarrassed to say out loud. "My body doesn't seem to know how to respond anymore. I feel disconnected from her, from myself. Like something inside me went to sleep and doesn't want to wake up that moment. Stayed with me." Because it reflects something I've heard countless times in different ways from men and women alike. The truth is, the human body, like any part of us, is deeply responsive to habit and experience. And when we go months or years without physical intimacy, without touch, without stimulation, the body begins to adapt. Unfortunately, that adaptation often means decline for men. This might show up as slower arousal, difficulty maintaining an erection, or a loss of desire for women. It can mean increased vaginal dryness, decreased sensitivity, or physical discomfort during intimacy. These changes don't happen overnight. They unfold slowly, subtly, until the idea of physical closeness begins to feel more like a challenge than a joy. And with every moment of avoidance, the body gets further away from what it once remembered so easily. But here's the part. Most people don't realize your body wants to remember. It's designed for connection, for closeness, for the gentle, life-affirming experience of intimacy. Even small steps, affectionate touch, soft caresses, emotional vulnerability can begin to reawaken what feels lost. I've seen couples in their 80s rediscover comfort, confidence, and even passion, and I've seen individuals reclaim a sense of aliveness they thought was gone forever. Paul, after some encouragement and guidance, began to explore intimacy again, not with pressure but with patience, and in time his words changed. "It's not about performance," he told me, "it's about feeling human again. When you stop using a part of your body, it fades. But when you begin to nurture it again with care, with time, it remembers, and often it heals." So now the question becomes, where do you go from here? What can you do starting today to reclaim this part of your life? No matter how long it's been, the answer might be simpler and more powerful than you think. Let's talk about it. 11. What you can do starting today, if you've come this far. Maybe something in these words has stirred something inside you. A memory, a longing, or even just a quiet realization that you've been missing more than you thought. And that's not a bad thing. Awareness is the first step toward healing. The good news is no matter your age, it is absolutely possible to reclaim intimacy in your life. And it doesn't have to start with a grand gesture. It can begin today with something small and deeply human. The willingness to reconnect. Start by talking to your partner if you have one. Be honest. Say the things you've been afraid to say. I miss being close. I feel distant. I want to feel connected again. These simple words can open a door that's been quietly closed for too long. Vulnerability is powerful. It invites trust, and trust invites touch. If you're single, know that intimacy doesn't begin with someone else. It begins with you. It's about rediscovering comfort in your own body, in your own presence. You can nurture this through gentle self-care movement and mindfulness. Even allowing yourself to feel sensual or curious again is a powerful act of self-respect. You don't need permission to feel alive.